Hello, welcome to day 2, part 2 of the critical approach to using generative AI as a pedagogical tool. This session focuses on introducing generative AI and how it's being used in schools. Firstly, before you begin, just in case you missed the instructions on Canvas, before beginning, please make sure you access the retrieval quiz. Okay, so pause the tape and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, welcome back. Day 2.2. Things that we're going to cover today. The first part really is looking at generative AI and specifically chatbots and understanding a little about what they are and how they work. And then being able to create basic prompts to get outputs of text and images. There's 3 tasks we're going to do. And the second is looking at how they're used in schools and thinking about how you have to use them in your own practice and what the implications might be. So there are several tasks. These can be found on the following slides. Okay, well, we're going to look at generative AI and specifically chatbots. And by the end of this session, you're going to hopefully understand a little bit of the difference between machine learning, which is a phrase you may have come across, and generative AI, which I often call Gen AI. We're going to understand a little about the functions of a Gen AI chatbot and be able to create some very basic prompts. So I actually asked a generative AI to create this image, and it shows machine learning and generative AI. Which one do you think, which of these two personalities, characters, represents which? This is just something to maybe pause and think about. Which one is machine learning? Which one is generative AI? Well, there you have the answers. Machine learning was seen as to be the more one with brute strength, I suppose, whereas Gen AI is more of a cloud, more of an imaginative, creative, perhaps, application of computing. And this was the prompt that I used. Create a picture illustrating the differences. So, what is machine learning, or ML as it's frequently abbreviated to? Machine learning, it sets out to discover and recognize patterns in large sets of data. And then it makes decisions based on previously agreed algorithms on the patterns that it sees. So think of it, if you will, like teaching a child, to recognize a dog when looking through picture books. There are lots of animals in these picture books, and it's seen lots of images of dogs before. So when it sees the next image of a dog, it can recognize a dog. That's a dog. Okay. Generative AI, you don't just recognize the patterns, or the algorithms don't just recognize patterns in large amounts of data. They take these large amounts of data and then they use them to create new things that did not exist before, new text, new images, new audio. Okay, so it's like teaching a child to draw a dog. You know, they've seen lots of dogs, they know how to use a pencil, and they draw something new. They create their own image of a dog. So generative AI programs, they learn patterns and structures based on through training data. Okay, they have these very large training data sets. And mainly what they learn, and particularly in the case of large language models, is what is the next most likely word. Okay, so what is it that's the most likely thing to come next based on what I know already? In a nutshell, that's the simplest explanation of what they're doing. A large language model is a kind of Gen AI that is designed to understand and generate human language. So they can interpret inputs in human language that they're given, and they can create in turn their own outputs in a specified human language. That could be using translation, that could be in an audio file, it could be in a written file. There's lots of ways that it could be done. They're trained on vast amounts of data, and they can perform tasks such as translation, summarization, text generation, and many more. The data sets that they're trained on determine the probability of this word. What would the next word be? Okay, which word is most likely to follow the word that I am focusing on now? So they develop these parameters, which are an expression of probability of words that make sense going together or seem to in their data sets. So that's all that they're based on. It's expressions of probability that this word follows that word. So a parameter is just an expression of how likely it is that one word is related to the word that follows it. So take the example of the word black. If you've got black, then there's a good chance that the next word might well be cat, because black cat is a pairing of words which is frequently seen. So the expression, the parameter of black and cat will have a particular value. Okay, this value will be higher than black being followed by moon or being followed by letterbox, for example. Okay, so a parameter is an expression of how likely it is that one word follows another. ChatGTP 3.5, which broke into the popular imagination, was launched in November 22, and that had 175 billion parameters. Newer models have even more. They've got perhaps around 1 trillion, and that number is growing. So why ChatGTP or chatbot? Well, the most famous language models are tuned. That means they're focused on being able to chat and to respond as human a voice as possible. Okay. So for this ITAP, you'll see we're using Microsoft Copilot, and we ask you to use it too, especially at school. We do occasionally refer to other models, and would suggest you sign up to the free version of ChatGTP, for example, for comparison. But by and large, Copilot is it's every bit as good as any of the other models, and because it's part of Microsoft, it's included in 365, things like that. So other popular models out there are Google's Gemini, ChatGTP, Claude by Anthropic, and Perplexity. I've got to be honest with you, I've not used Perplexity very much, but I've been very impressed with the others, particularly, and I think this is just a personal preference, Claude seems to be something that I'm very comfortable using, but I've had very good experiences with Gemini and ChatGTP as well. I think this is the sort of thing where ultimately what works best for you, what you end up having an account with. They all have free accounts that you can sign up for, or accounts with a limited free trial period. So if you do sign up for them, just be aware of how long a free trial might last for. So as we've said, large language models generate by predicting, matching words based on probability. And they can predict dots in photos, words for language, or even match words to sound waves for audio. And we all do this ourselves. It's worth remembering that when we're speaking or when we're listening, particularly, we kind of predict what words we're going to hear next. So think of these phrases: a penny for your thoughts, bite the bullet, don't cry over spilled milk, every cloud has a silver lining. So I hope you've, even just in that little second that I gave you to pause and think about what it was going to come next, you might have joined some of those up, because they're common phrases that you have intuitively learned may come together quite often. Okay, so it's something that we do all the time ourselves. I asked Copilot what would be the 3 most common topics a chatbot would use in response to the word garlic bread. What do you think Copilot responded with? Okay, so recipes and variations, health and nutrition, cultural and historical insights. So I think all 3 very interesting and relevant topics there. But guess what Copilot will return for the following terms: football, Spain, singing. So this is a task that I'd like you to do. What would be the 3 most common topics an AI chatbot would output about in response to the word football or Spain or singing? And do this now, pause it, and then we'll compare on the next slide. So what I'd like you to do is reflect on this idea of consistency. Chatbots don't always return the same answers all the time. Because they deal in probability, not certainty, they can have variations, and there are variations which are just built into the process. So you may have something similar, a list similar for football or Spain or singing, but you may have something different, or you may have something slightly different but expressed in a different way, and that's something important to be aware of. The most basic use for a chatbot is to use it like a search engine to find out information about something. It's very useful for that. It can be very intuitive, and indeed AI responses are now regularly included in both Google search returns and Bing search return responses. So you've probably seen this as well outside of a dedicated chatbot app. But here's one that I did about good questions you could ask to get a chatbot to start with a chatbot. So this is what it returned. This is Copilot again. Okay, so prompting is the skill of creating an input which then gives you an output from a chatbot or other generative AI. So they can become increasingly complex because these tools can do an awful lot. So telling me a fun fact, we get something about honey and never spoiling. But then asking a question about maths and then asking for a response in English, Spanish and Russian came back in a very, very short time as well. However, my English is good, my Spanish is basic, and my Russian is non-existent. So I've no idea if the veracity of those second two is sufficiently good for schools, which is why chatbots and AI tools which are specifically designed for schools and specifically quality assured and tested for schools are becoming so important. Okay, so here's the tasks now. Look at these questions on the right. Invent your own question, appropriate question to ask Copilot. What happens if you rephrase it? What happens if you tweak it? Ask for perhaps more information, ask for a specific detail. And I'd like you to take screenshots of these and put them in your journal PowerPoint. Think about how this has changed your prompt and how you changed the prompt and what was the impact. Maybe write a few comments on that in your journal PowerPoint as well. So generative AI can also create a lot of images. This is something that's becoming very popular in school, but it's actually been part of life for a very long time. Snapchat, for example, has had very powerful AI filters for a long time. Facebook Messenger, Instagram as well. But you can create a lot of pictures which are completely new. Here are 3 prompts that can get some fun images. I asked Copilot to suggest some prompts for fun things. A cat wearing a superhero costume, a dinosaur riding a skateboard, a penguin dressed as a pirate. Okay, so I'd like you to have a go at these too. Can you use Copilot to create images using one of these prompts? Can you adapt that once you've got a first draft of it? Could you adapt it by changing the prompt, making your information or your request more specific, and then copy both images into your journal? If you happen to see the images that other people have made with similar prompts, then I think you'll be surprised at how different they can be. Finally, to recap the first part of this, the first session of this part 2. The basic difference between machine learning and generative AI is that machine learning analyzes patterns in large amounts of data. Generative AI creates new outputs and doesn't just analyze, but it creates things based on the data it was trained on. Chatbots work by predicting which word or image or sound is most likely going to follow the preceding one. And entering prompts into generative AI tools return outputs, images and pictures, and that these can be changed, and the more specific prompt you give, the more specific and detailed the output you will get. So thank you very much for being with me during this first session of part 2, and we'll pick this up in the second session at your convenience.